The Problem with Wall Street. May 16, 2020 by Anna von Reitz. The first problem with Wall Street is that it was built by slaves, and their dead bodies were thrown in piles to create the wall that Wall Street is named after. That, whether you are a spiritual man or not, cries out to the Creator with the pain and misery of the thousands who were worked to death there in the land of Nod. The second problem is that the men who inhabit Wall Street believe in, support, and profit from slavery, and always have. They are an odd coalition of owner interests, Talmudic Jews, not real Judeans, Pontifical Catholics, not real Catholics, and American robber barons, not real Americans. For those just entering the porthole on the way home to the land and soil, Talmudic Jews believe they have the right to slay and enslave all Gentiles. Pontifical Catholics believe the same thing about non-Catholics. And American robber barons long ago devolved into transnationals, men who don't deserve a country of origin, for they have no natural allegiances. They are the men with souls so dead. The varied members of this Wall Street coalition have a shared love of money and enslavement, money because it allows them to enslave, and enslavement because it makes them money. One hand, as they say, washes the other. So, it should be no surprise at all that the Roman pontiff sided with the South in the so-called American Civil War. And it should be no surprise to find Seed and Company up to its nostrils as the holding company buried in the heart of the DTCC, holding all the American clearinghouse certificates authorized under false pretenses by the King Rat, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It should also be no surprise that slavery in this country didn't end over a century and a half ago. It continued right on with hardly a blip, as the privately owned slaves were converted into publicly owned slaves, first impacting American Negroes, and eventually, extending to everyone. According to them, we are all slaves owned by the government, which, in keeping with the total lie concept, isn't a government. It's a foreign, private, for-profit governmental services corporation. Are you being served for dinner? Or are you ready to put an end to this? Ancient Rome established its empire on the backs of slaves. What do you expect from a Roman pontiff? It turns out that they used the same means to establish the U.S. hegemony and will happily enslave a billion Chinese, too. Until we all wake up and realize what they are doing and squash them flat as bugs. That's an appealing thought, isn't it? Come on, Visigoths. Rah rah rah. They created millions of slaves for themselves, out of thin air. And profited from selling bogus slave labor contracts, the Miller Act, and slave bodies, the Buck Act, and slave dollars, the Federal Reserve Act. They created a whole make-believe world for themselves, complete with a court system to enforce their delusions on actual people and actual assets. And then with their profits from all this bunco, they hired our own army and various international forces to bilk us and treat us as the presumed enemy. Of course, everything they have done has hinged on presumptions, false presumptions made behind our backs, without our knowledge, without our consent, and enforced as unconscionable contracts. It's all just fraud, but it stands, until everyone shakes awake and calls it for what it is. With a loud voice. In 1980, the big lie went viral with the Monetary Control Act. Formerly called the Depository Institutions Deregulation and Monetary Control Act, Public Law 96-221, which allowed for both the monopolization of the Federal Reserve's control of non-member banks, and the gutting of control and accountability by the Board of Governors. Imagine not only being able to steal from and control access to everyone else's cookie jars, but being held harmless for doing so. Then, in addition, imagine being able to order an unlimited supply of cookies, made to your order, and all charged to your slaves' accounts? The Monetary Control Act of 1980 allowed for the unlimited collateralization of debt. You can now buy Florida real estate out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, we come up to date with the rest of the story. Read this. https://tinyurl.com/joint-task-force. Links to Anna's articles and resources can be found in the video description box.